Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something most people won't. Your absence is not a void. It's not an empty space that disappears into the background like silence in a crowded room. No, your absence echoes. It rings in a man's ears when he least expects it. And if you understand how to wield that absence, you don't chase his attention, you command it. So many people believe that being present all the time is the key to connection. They think, if I'm always there, always giving, always loving, he'll see my worth. But here's the truth no one teaches you. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't stepping closer, it's stepping back. Because it's not just your presence that creates emotional impact. It's what happens when you're not there. When a man begins to miss you, truly miss you, something happens on a psychological level that no amount of convincing can achieve. You activate a part of his brain that's tied not to logic but to emotion. And emotion is what bonds us, not reason. So how do you trigger that emotional response in your absence? How do you make the silence between texts louder than the words themselves? You do it in 5 subtle, powerful ways that speak directly to a man's heart, and not in a manipulative way, but in a way that reflects your value. First, you trigger a man's emotions through the contrast your absence creates. Think about it. When you're consistently available, your presence starts to blend into the fabric of his everyday life. He may enjoy it, even appreciate it, but he doesn't feel the depth of it because it's always there. But when you pull away, not as punishment, but as a natural reflection of your self-worth, you create contrast. He notices the difference. The conversations feel quieter. The comfort he took for granted is no longer there to lean on. That contrast forces reflection. It forces him to ask himself, why do I feel this shift so deeply? And suddenly you're not just someone he talks to, you're someone he feels. Second, your absence reminds him of your standards. When you choose to walk away from mediocre effort, when you stop responding to breadcrumbs or half investments, you're not being cold, you're being clear. You're saying, I will not participate in a one-sided connection. And guess what? That boundary, that silence, that disappearance, it's a mirror. It reflects his behavior back at him. And in that mirror, he sees the gap between what you deserve and what he's giving. That discomfort, that's where growth begins. That's where a man who wants to rise for you begins to feel the need to do better. Not because you asked, but because he misses what he had when you were around. Third, you stir something primal in him, the chase. Let's be clear, this isn't about playing games, it's about returning to a natural polarity that exists in romantic energy. When you are always the one initiating, always filling the space, always reaching out, you rob him of the opportunity to pursue you in a way that feels deeply fulfilling to him. Men don't fall for women because they're convenient. They fall because there's a magnetism, a sense of challenge, not difficulty but value. When you step back, when you let the silence speak, when you let him wonder, you allow space for desire to bloom. And that wondering becomes curiosity, which becomes effort, which becomes emotion. Fourth, your absence gives him time to feel the consequences of his choices. Sometimes we're so quick to fill the silence, to bridge the gap, to rescue a connection that feels like it's slipping. We forget that discomfort can be a teacher. When a man knows that you're always a text away, always ready to forgive, always willing to jump back in, he doesn't feel urgency. But when you step away and you don't rush back in at the first sign of interest, he has to sit with himself. He has to sit with the emptiness he created. And in that silence, if he cares, he'll feel it. He'll notice that your absence isn't just a gap in conversation, it's a gap in his life. That's when he realizes what your presence actually meant. Finally, your absence reminds him of your wholeness. When you stop orbiting his world and return to your own, he sees something magnetic. A woman who is full on her own. A woman who doesn't need him to feel valuable because her value is already intact. That kind of energy is irresistible. It's not desperate. It's not clinging. It's centered, rooted, alive. When a man feels that you're not waiting for him to give your life meaning, that you're already living it, he respects you. And respect is the foundation of any deep emotional bond. He begins to admire you. And admiration, that's the gateway to love. So if you've ever felt the need to pull back, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, know that doing so is not weakness, it's strength. It's not giving up, it's giving space for him to show up. And if he doesn't, then your absence becomes the filter that reveals who was never truly for you in the first place. There's a difference between being missed because you went silent as a tactic and being missed because your presence actually mattered. You want the latter. That's why this only works when your presence has been meaningful. When you've shown up with warmth, with value, with real connection, then your absence becomes undeniable. It lingers. It haunts him in the best way. It makes him remember not just how you made him feel, but who he was when he was with you. That's what creates emotional gravity. That's what draws him back, not just to your image, but to the experience of you. This isn't about being elusive. It's about being authentic. If your heart is in the right place, if you're walking away because staying would mean abandoning your own self-respect, then your absence becomes a love letter to yourself. And that letter, he reads it in the quiet moments, in the late nights, in the flashes of memory that come without warning. And if he's the right man, he doesn't just miss you, he moves for you. He grows for you because your absence didn't just hurt, it taught. Because your absence didn't just hurt, it taught. It taught him what life feels like without the person who brought clarity to his chaos. It taught him what it means to be around someone who listens with intention, speaks with purpose, and lives with a quiet kind of grace. It reminded him that connection isn't built on constant access, it's built on meaningful moments. And when those moments are gone, a man is forced to confront whether he truly showed up while they were there. Here's the twist. When you leave a space and you do it with dignity, you're not just teaching him, you're teaching yourself. You're reinforcing your value by refusing to beg someone to see it. You're saying, I will not distort my light to fit inside someone else's shadow. You're saying, if I'm not met with reciprocity, I will not fill in the silence with my effort alone. And when you do that, something amazing happens. You start to attract men and people in general who see you without needing to be told how to. The beauty of your absence is that it becomes a mirror for both of you. He gets to see what he did or didn't bring to the table. And you get to see what you were tolerating. You get distance from the haze of emotion and you start to view things with a sharper lens. You realize where you were overextending, where you were hoping instead of observing, where you were investing in potential instead of reality. And that's a powerful shift because when you stop trying to maintain a connection at any cost and you step into the kind of self-worth that says, I am the prize too, you stop feeling rejected. When someone pulls away, you start recognizing that your presence is something to be earned, not assumed. And that's not arrogance. That's emotional maturity. A man doesn't fall in love with a woman who always chases, who always explains herself, who always justifies her place in his life. He falls in love with a woman who knows she belongs, who doesn't seek validation through proximity, but radiates value from within. And nothing communicates that more clearly than your absence when it's rooted in self-respect. You see, emotional gravity isn't just about how you connect. It's about what happens when you don't. Do the memories still linger? Does your name still come up in conversation? Do the songs, the places, the quiet moments still feel like they carry your presence, even when you're not there? If you've shown up authentically, if you've loved without losing yourself, the answer is yes. Because emotional impact isn't about volume, it's about resonance. And you can't fake resonance. You can't fake the kind of energy that stays with someone. That's what you're leaving behind when you choose not to overgive. When you stop showing up for someone who doesn't meet you halfway, you're not disappearing. You're leaving a mark. A man may not realize it in the moment. He may confuse your silence for indifference, but over time he begins to feel the difference between someone who filled a role and someone who filled a room. You see, most people don't miss you when you're gone. They miss you when they realize what you brought into their life. They miss the calm you carried in your presence, the softness you offered without condition, the way your words made them feel understood. That doesn't disappear the moment you walk away. It sinks in, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. And when it does, it's not about regret, it's about awakening. He begins to trace back the moments he overlooked, the things he took for granted, the opportunities he missed to step up. That's when your absence does something profound. It challenges his story. It disrupts the narrative he told himself about what you meant, about who you were, about how replaceable he thought you might be. And in that disruption, he's left with one truth. Emotional connection doesn't come around every day. You may think you're just one person, but to the right man, or even the man who took you for granted, you are not just a woman. You're the woman who made him feel seen in a way that pierced through his defenses. And once a man has experienced that, the bar is permanently raised. No temporary distraction can replicate it. Because what you gave wasn't a performance, it was a reflection of your essence. And that kind of energy leaves a lasting imprint. Now here's where this becomes even more powerful. Your absence doesn't just remind him of your value, it recenters you in your own. Because when you reclaim your energy, you stop placing your worth in someone else's hands. You stop bending your boundaries for the sake of potential. You stop romanticizing inconsistency and start honoring clarity. And clarity feels good. It feels solid. It gives you peace. It allows you to show up differently the next time, not with walls, but with standards, not with fear, but with discernment. Because when you've been brave enough to walk away, you've proven to yourself that your love is a choice, not a need. You don't stay out of fear of being alone. You stay only where your energy is matched and your presence is appreciated, not merely enjoyed. And yes, he will notice, not because you posted something to make him jealous, not because you orchestrated some grand exit, but because you stopped pouring into something that gave nothing back. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped making excuses for his inconsistency. You let go, not in bitterness, but in truth. That kind of letting go, it's not silence, it's power. And that power, it vibrates in the empty space you once filled. It vibrates in the unspoken moments, in the plans he once took for granted, in the comfort of your voice he can no longer reach. He starts to realize that you weren't just a moment, you were a mood, you were an atmosphere, and now that you're gone, everything feels a little colder. But here's the beauty, whether he comes back or not is not the point. The point is, you did. You came back to yourself, you returned your energy to its rightful place. And in doing so, you created the kind of emotional shift that no words ever could. Because while presence shows a man who you are, absence reveals whether he values it. And sometimes that absence is the very thing that lights the fire he didn't know was dimming. Or it's the light that shows you that you were always the flame, not the fuel. So let your silence speak, let your distance teach, let your life continue, rich, full, vibrant, because when you live that way, any man who's meant for you will feel the absence not as punishment but as a challenge to rise. And the ones who don't, they were never meant to stand beside the woman you've become. They were never meant to stand beside the woman you've become. Because the woman you've become doesn't beg for a place. She owns her space. She doesn't try to convince someone of her worth. She lives it, breathes it, embodies it in every choice she makes. And that includes the choice to walk away when something doesn't honor her. That includes the choice to stay quiet when the impulse to explain herself rises up. That includes the choice to protect her peace, even if it means letting go of someone she once deeply wanted. That's the real power of your absence. It's not about the reaction it causes in someone else. It's about the transformation it causes in you. Because when you stop fighting to be understood by someone who never tried to understand you in the first place, you start seeing yourself with clearer eyes. You start validating your own instincts. You stop second-guessing the little moments that felt off, because now you trust that the part of you that felt unappreciated was right. Your absence is not just the space you leave in someone else's life. It's the signal you send to the universe about what you will no longer settle for. Every time you walk away from someone who gives you less than you deserve, you send a ripple out into the world that says, "This is what I know I'm worth." And the world responds, not instantly, not always in the way you expect, but eventually with something that matches your new standard. And that's what makes this journey so meaningful. You're not just learning how to affect someone else's emotions, you're learning how to own your own. You're no longer giving someone else the pen and asking them to write your story. You're holding it yourself, page by page, choice by choice, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because that's when your strength is forged, not in the comfort of being wanted, but in the quiet of walking away. Think about it. When you were always there, always available, always reachable, how did he treat that access? Was it treasured or was it assumed? Because the moment someone believes you'll always be there, no matter how little they show up, they stop choosing you. You become a fixture instead of a force. And that's not what you were meant to be. You weren't meant to be background noise. You were meant to be the moment he realizes he has to step up or step out. And your absence becomes the catalyst for that realization. He may scroll through old photos. He may check your profile late at night, wondering why things feel different. He may even reach out casually, as if nothing has changed. But you'll know. You'll feel it. That subtle difference between someone who's reaching out because they miss the benefits of you and someone who misses the soul of you. Your absence sharpens your intuition. It tunes you into what's real and what's recycled. Because now you're not looking to be chosen. You're looking to see who's capable of choosing you fully. And it doesn't stop with him. Your absence in any relationship, romantic, platonic, even professional, sends the same message. That you are not available to be half loved. That you will not remain where you are tolerated more than you are celebrated. That your kindness is not a weakness to be milked, but a strength to be earned. People notice when someone who once gave generously starts conserving their energy. They notice when the warmth dims, not because it burned out, but because it was no longer being returned. And the ones who truly care, the ones who are emotionally equipped to receive your presence, they rise, they reach out, they reflect, they shift. And the ones who don't, let them fade, not out of bitterness, not out of resentment, but out of peace. Because when you operate from a place of alignment, your absence becomes not just a message, it becomes your boundary. It becomes the quiet door that closes behind you when you realize you've outgrown the room. There's something deeply magnetic about a person who doesn't force anything, who doesn't over-explain, doesn't chase, doesn't perform, who simply lets go of what doesn't feel right and trusts that what's meant will meet them where they are. That energy, it's rare, and rare energy is always remembered. So don't be afraid to disappear from the places where you had to shrink to fit. Don't be afraid to stop calling, stop texting, stop checking in when you were the only one doing so. Don't be afraid to stop showing up for someone who never noticed you were showing up at all. That isn't coldness, that's clarity. And clarity, once it's found, changes everything. A man doesn't grow when he's comfortable. He grows when he feels the loss of something that made his world better. He grows when the silence starts asking louder questions than your words ever did. He grows when your absence disrupts the rhythm he took for granted. But none of that happens if you never step back. None of it happens if you keep cushioning his experience with your presence, even when it's no longer being matched with care. And here's what's wild. Sometimes your absence won't lead him back. Sometimes it won't trigger the chase or the apology or the grand realization, but it will still be the right move. Because it wasn't about controlling his outcome. It was about honoring yours. And that is the real victory. That is where you reclaim your power. When the choice to walk away isn't dependent on whether or not he follows. When the reward isn't his regret, it's your freedom. And in that freedom, you rise. You become a woman who knows she doesn't have to scream to be heard, who knows her silence carries weight, who knows her distance says, you had something real, and you let it go. That kind of energy lives rent-free in a man's heart far longer than 1,000 messages ever could. Because here's the truth. Absence is a form of communication. It says, this is what life looks like without me in it. And when your presence was rooted in truth, in kindness, in authenticity, that message hits hard. He won't just remember what you looked like. He'll remember what he felt like around you. He'll remember the way you believed in him, the way you made him feel understood, the way you created space for something real, and the way he lost that. Let him feel it. Let him sit in the quiet and wonder where you went. Let him scroll through memories and feel the weight of what was once light. Let your absence be the mirror he has to look into, whether he wants to or not. Because if your presence didn't move him, your absence just might. And while he's doing that, you're not waiting. You're not watching the clock, hoping for the text. You're out there becoming even more of yourself. You're surrounding yourself with people who reflect your light back to you, not dim it. You're pursuing the life that brings you peace, joy, and truth. Because your absence wasn't just the end of something, it was the beginning of everything. When a man truly sees who you are, when the full weight of your absence crashes into his life, it's not just a wake-up call, it's a reckoning. It's the moment he realizes he wasn't just losing a person, he was losing the chance to become someone better with you. And if he ever gets the chance again, it'll be because you chose. Not out of loneliness, not out of longing, but out of alignment. Because now you know your presence is a gift, and your absence, a force. A force that doesn't scream, doesn't demand, doesn't dramatize, but leaves its mark with quiet precision. A force that lingers in the decisions he makes days, weeks, even months later. A force that redefines how he measures connection from now on. Because once a man has felt the difference between someone who was merely around and someone who was present, he can't unfeel it. And you were present not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. You brought something real, something rare. And now that absence, it's not just space, it's impact. That impact isn't tied to how loudly you exit. It's in how cleanly you let go. No chaos, no spectacle. Just a graceful shift. One moment you're there, pouring into something with heart and intention, and the next you're not. You remove yourself. You don't announce it. You don't wait for permission. You simply disappear from the dynamic that asked you to settle for less. And the beauty of that decision is that it creates a stillness, a contrast that he can't ignore. In that stillness, he has to sit with himself. And that can be the most uncomfortable place in the world for someone who's been coasting through connections, never having to face the consequences of emotional laziness. Suddenly there's no soft landing, no guaranteed warmth, no default affection. What's left is the reality of what he gave and what he didn't. And that confrontation, that's not just about missing you. It's about realizing that your presence was an invitation he didn't RSVP to. But you did more than invite. You stayed open. You gave. You offered truth and vulnerability without playing small. You leaned in when it mattered. You showed up in a world where so many people hold back, protect, or manipulate to get what they want. You didn't do any of that. You came as you are. And that's what makes your absence so powerful. Because it's not a game. It's not strategy. It's a line in the sand that says, this is the last time I show up for someone who doesn't meet me halfway. That's the kind of line that reshapes your story, because it's not about what you lose, it's about what you reclaim. You stop giving from emptiness, you stop auditioning for love, you stop attaching your value to someone else's ability to recognize it. And that shift, while deeply internal, manifests outwardly, in your posture, in your eyes, in the way you carry yourself through the world. People notice. He notices. He might not have the words for it, but he feels it in his gut that something about you has changed. You've leveled up, not through bitterness, but through clarity. And that clarity has made you more magnetic than ever, not because you're trying to be, but because you finally stopped trying at all. There's a different energy to a woman who no longer seeks validation. She doesn't reach for connection. She attracts it. She doesn't beg for effort. She inspires it. She doesn't try to be chosen. She chooses. That's who you become when you let your absence speak, not as revenge, not as manipulation, but as truth. And here's what he will begin to understand over time. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because you finally started caring about yourself more. You walked away because your self-respect grew louder than your hope. You walked away not because you didn't love, but because you did, and you refused to love from a place of lack. And that kind of love is unforgettable. You see, there's a moment that happens, and it happens quietly, when he looks around and realizes the emotional landscape has changed. The late-night conversations are gone. The comfort of knowing you're just a message away, gone. The emotional security he passively received from your presence, gone. And suddenly he's left with this aching awareness that you weren't just another person in his life. You were a source of meaning, of stability, of feeling. And the absence of that feeling creates a void, one he didn't know existed, one he can't just fill with distraction. Because no matter how many people he talks to, no matter how many shallow connections he entertains, there's this thread that keeps pulling his memory back to you, to your tone, to your softness, to your strength. And that thread doesn't break easily, not when it was tied to something real. Real is rare, and people may pretend they don't need it until they feel the absence of it. Then it becomes all they crave. But while he's realizing all of this, you're moving, not on necessarily, but forward. You're investing in your joy. You're pouring energy into places that give back. You're loving your own company again. You're finding peace in the spaces that used to ache. And you're doing all of this without looking over your shoulder. Because you know now, if someone has to lose you to learn, that's their lesson, not your burden. This is what maturity looks like. This is what healing looks like. It's not about cutting people off cold and walking away with a smirk. It's about finally refusing to abandon yourself just to be close to someone who never truly saw you. It's about pausing long enough to ask, what am I really getting in return? And answering honestly, even when that honesty hurts. Because you've realized now that you don't want to be missed, you want to be matched. You want to be met with consistency, with depth, with reciprocity. And if someone can't give that, your absence is the answer. And here's what makes your energy unforgettable. You cared. Genuinely. You didn't fake detachment. You weren't cold to appear strong. You showed up with an open heart, and that is what makes your departure so powerful. Because when someone loses a woman who didn't need to be hard to be respected, who led with softness, with boundaries, with self-awareness, that loss hits differently. It hits in the mornings when the bed feels emptier. It hits in the evenings when the phone stays silent. It hits in the gaps between conversations that used to be filled with your voice, your presence, your light. That's what you leave behind. Not just a memory, but a standard. One that now lives in his mind. One he'll carry with him, whether he knows it or not, into every future connection. And he'll feel the difference again and again when it's not you. That's the power of walking away when it's no longer right. That's the strength of loving deeply but not blindly. That's the freedom that comes with knowing. You gave your best. You didn't withhold. You didn't manipulate. You simply chose yourself when the time came to decide. And that choice, that's what makes you unforgettable. Because it's not just that you were different, it's that you treated him like he could be different too. You believed in his potential, you nurtured his spirit, you saw the version of him he wasn't ready to step into yet. And when you walked away, you didn't slam the door. You simply stopped holding it open. That grace, that quiet kind of goodbye, it lingers long after the words stop, long after the moments fade, because absence, when rooted in self-love, becomes a legacy. It becomes a reminder, not just of what he lost, but of what you gave and what you'll never again give to someone who doesn't give back.